this is called Preserving the Dream. We're going to talk a little bit about some preservation work that we did in regards to tracking down some lost media, but I want to bring two people to the stage. They're just incredible, to be honest. Really, really valued members of the TFNation team. Please give a big round of applause to Mr. Andrew Turnbull and Mr. Kris Carter.
Custom music for that.
Yeah. Careful. What was that? Right. So, I think it's probably time to give you a little bit of backstory. Not enough to hurt you or anything like that. How many people were here in Reading of last year who went to the Minicon in Reading? Okay. So, brief history was that in the early 2000s, there was a company called Dreamwave that produced a Transformers comic book. Do we have anybody in the room who was younger than 20 years old? Yes, okay. This is a story from before you were born. So, in the early 2000s, Transformers really hadn't been a going concern in comic books for almost a decade. In fact, a little bit longer. With any severe popularity. And in the early 2000s, a company comes along called Dreamwave, and it becomes a massive success in terms of the comic book sales numbers of the day. It lasts about two and a bit years before it goes bankrupt. All right? And at Reading, last year, we realized that it was the 20th anniversary of the last issue coming out. Now, what's interesting about Dreamwave is that because it went out of business over Christmas, while everybody was waiting on the next issue, it meant that there was an awful lot of work that just never came out. It never materialized, but it did exist. And so I thought, because I am one of these maniacs who likes Dreamwave, yeah, exactly.
Support groups are available.
I thought it would be interesting to talk a little bit about the history of it, because it is something that people aren't necessarily familiar with. It lives very much in the shadow of IDW, which came along and held the license for 17 years. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about it. So we did this panel. And over the course of the last 2 decades, a bunch of artwork from pages and books that were never published has made its way online. But they've started coming out online at a point where the internet wasn't really interested in preserving a lot of things. So there's some things that, if you can believe it, because it feels almost impossible now, where something would go online and then it would disappear and you would never see it again. And because I was frantically obsessed with Dreamwave, every so often I would pick things up. And lo and behold, we found out that we had almost one completed full issue. Don't get too excited, we already released it. Spoilers. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about the history of it, and a little bit about how we managed to get that book out. So as I say, here's a bunch of issues. This is ongoing issue 11, War Within, Age of Wrath number 4, and Energon number 31. So there's 3 books running simultaneously. Again, we had these in various states, but for the most part, we had a lot of War Within, Age of Wrath, issue 4, which is a mouthful every time I say it. Okay, so if I just say Age of Wrath, you know I'm talking about number 4. Again, a bunch of artwork has been released. Some of this is just in black and white. This is issue 11, page 1, and this is actually issue 12. Part of the reason that IDW went bankrupt was because they were terrible at keeping the deadlines. And the reason that we have 11 and 12 is because fill-in artists would often be brought in to try and get the book back on track. So this is drawn by Don Figueroa, and this one, issue 12, is drawn by Guido Guidi. So again, just a little bit of backstory for you. So, Mr. Turnbull, do you want to sort of explain to people what these images are and sort of how we started with this?
Yeah, so when Dave came to me with the idea of, can we, after having sourced it, goes, we've got most of issue 4, can we release it? And I was like, yes. Then the first thing he said was, can we print it? And I had to explain to David in great detail that the image zoom in CSI is a blatant lie. You can't just magically zoom it and make it good. So you're looking at what you have is what you can deal with. You can maybe make it slightly bigger, but you run the risk of making it unreadable. So this is the original pencils from Joe Nang for issue 1. That is the lettering guide that Simon Furman did. Now, Simon, as an old school professional, back in the day, writers would often, when they got art, then provide lettering guides which would be passed on to the letter to either follow or disregard. Now, this page is there was some lettered because there were 4 or 5 pages available lettered, and Dave said, here's what we've got, can you do the rest? And it's like, okay, I'll need to match what it is, because the whole point was to make it look like the complete article. So I need to go up because I'm old and I can't see. Yes, this is the one I tweaked, because my name's at the bottom as well. I added my name in the credits, because hey, I'm doing the work.
Ego.
But most of this page was done, but it was such a very low-res picture that you could see the picture, but nobody could read it. So I was basically, I'll take this into a program called Adobe Illustrator, I'll see where I can do in terms of resizing the art, and then I basically sat and went through every conceivable font till I found the one that matched what they did. It was quite easy because I kind of knew some of what Dreamwave were doing at the time, because they were quite tight with the letterers, so they didn't actually buy a lot of good fonts. They used quite a lot of free stuff, which was very helpful for me, because I'm Scottish and we're tight, so we don't like spending money either. So I found that. So that all of that is actually, I've re-lettered it to match what was actually on the low-res sample. So it looks identical to what was produced by the original letterer, but that's my version of it. So that was kind of the first start of, if that worked, I'm like, yes, we can then do the other 21 pages.
Yeah, I was going to say, because I think as long as the lettering is legible, you can get away with some reasonably shoddy-looking artwork or shoddy quality. As long as you can read what's there, even if it's a bit blurry, that's the key, isn't it? So, yeah.
So as I say, we had a lot of the pages, but we didn't have the full issue. And so a lot of these, the image on the right-hand side here, for example, Mr. Turnbull says that, he went and tweaked it a little bit. There we go. Went in and tweaked it a little bit, but this page did exist, and it's one that you could have probably found easily enough online, but there were a bunch of pages that we didn't have. How we actually managed to fill the gaps was, I was on a call one day with Simon Furman. Now, to give you a little bit of context for this, about a decade ago, Simon did a presentation at a convention here in the UK, and he was talking about the start of his run on IDW. And he had a presentation made up, and I noticed that he had some pages on that presentation that I didn't have. So I stole them. Don't tell him that. But what it meant is that perhaps Simon has more of it. So I spoke with Simon and I said, look, I know this is going to sound weird, and I know it's 20 years ago and all of that stuff, but do you have any of this stuff? And he said, look, I've got a file somewhere. And usually, you will hear this story from anybody, especially Jim Sorensen. If somebody says, I think I've got it somewhere, it usually means you'll never see it, okay? Because it's in a loft or a lockup or something like that. Anyway, he turns around and says, actually, yeah, I'll pull it out and I'll send it to you in the post with everything that I've got. And one day, an envelope arrives at my house and it is full of the page that you see in the middle. It is Simon's, as Andy says, lettering proofs. What he is doing is he is getting an email from Dreamwave with the page. He's then printing it out and he is drawing where he wants the dialogue to go. Okay? So that's exactly what that second image is. And lo and behold, there were all the missing pages. So we finally had it in one form. It wasn't complete. The coloring wasn't done. Bear in mind as well, just for a little bit of historical context, this book would have been finished. It would have been colored, completed, all of that stuff. But we don't have access to that. All we had access to was the black and white pages that Simon had and kindly gave us. So, Andy talked a little bit about the upscaling process and things like that, talking about could we publish it. Now, this was a very early idea. One of the reasons that this idea will never bear any fruit is because there's a lot of unpleasantness that took place towards the end of Dreamwave. And what I mean by that is most, if not all of the people who've worked on this book have never seen a penny for their work on this book. So it would be completely immoral for us to actually publish it. But could we try and put it out? That didn't stop me from wondering whether or not you could try. And that's when I ran into the issue of CSI. Mr. Carter.
Yeah, this is the weird thing. So with the emails that Simon would have received, when Simon got those emails, the image that was in those emails would have been at a resolution of 72 dpi. So dpi is dots per inch. It's the number of dots that make up the image you're looking at. So that email would have been in 72 dpi, which is what most screens are at the time anyway. When the comics get made, comics usually work under 600 dpi. So when you look at 600 compared to 72, that's quite a drop in quality. Then to make it worse, Simon is taking these emails, physically printing them out, drawing on them, and then giving them to these guys to...
The vandal.
The vandal,
making our work more difficult.
Yeah, so it's like kind of making a photocopy of a photocopy of a photocopy, and the quality just gets worse and worse and worse. But we still have something, and you can work with that. So you can try then take that drawing and you can try and upscale it a little bit. So you can take it from 72, you can take it back up to 100 or 200 and see what it looks like. And what it'll look like normally is blurry or blocky, which neither one are kind of what you want. But we've come a long way with image programs nowadays. And there's a lot of ways you can tweak the artwork to get to a point where it's not really printable, but it's at least looks a little bit better on a screen.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what we were aiming at. So if you can get it to look good on screen, that was kind of where we were at with it, I think.
Yeah, and this is just a test that I've done for the sake of this presentation. This is a scanned copy that I have done from the front cover of issue 1 of Age of Wrath. And I think you would all agree that it looks pretty good. Yeah, it looks absolutely fine. But here's the rub. This is what happens if you zoom in to this book, which looks brilliant here.
Yeah, that's the stuff.
So, Mr. Carter, what is happening?
Right, so this is basically an artifact. There goes my coffee. It's fine. The lid's on. This is an artifact of the printing process. I'm going to stand up as well because my knees are bad. So all these little dots you can see across here, these are a mixture of what's called half-toning and rosettes. So half-toning is how you kind of make shades when you're printing. So you'll have lots of little dots, and the bigger those dots are, the darker they'll be on the page. And you'll see some of the dots will get quite big, some of the dots will get smaller, and as they get smaller, you get that kind of shading. So that's how you get just basic half-toning. But we are working in full color as well. So any kind of color that you see on a page in any kind of printed format is going to be made up of 4 distinct colors. So you've got cyan, magenta, yellow, and black, or key as it's sometimes called in the industry. So CMYK is your 4 basic colors that make up all the colors. And all they are is very tiny dots of those colors in different combinations, in different amounts of half-toning. So when you put all that together, you get a colored image physically printed on the paper. Now, what scuppers us a little bit is that when you've got that and you've printed it and then you're trying to scan it in, you're no longer scanning in just one nice consistent color. You're scanning in all these little dots, and you can't really avoid that. So what we need to do is find a way to make those dots one consistent color again. So I used two main programs to try and sort this issue out a little bit. And I used Adobe Photoshop because I got free access to it from my university that I used to work at, which was quite handy. I also then used Affinity Photo, which was a one-time purchase, and if you can't afford Photoshop, it's a really good alternative. Or you could pirate it, but I wouldn't recommend that.
Didn't hear that.
So Photoshop and Affinity, they both have a function in there called blur. And what happens is, if you apply a basic blur across this kind of dotty pattern, it'll uniform that pattern pretty nicely. But, oh, there we go. Yeah, there we go. So it's very, very blurry, but it's removed all the dots. So this is a particular filter called Gaussian blur, and it lets you adjust the amount of blur that you're putting on there as well. So it's finding that mix of how far do I push the blur so that I can still see it, and how far do I not push it so that it's not just a complete blurry mess. But once you've blurred it, then you can use other filters such as sharpen or levels to try and then bring up the darker areas and push back the lighter areas and try and sharpen that image up a little bit. And basically this is the approach we took for every scanned page that we had to try and beef it up the colors a little bit. We'll never get it as good as the original digital files, but by taking this kind of like approach, we can at least make it somewhat readable. Another thing I used to do as well is, because the images were fairly low resolution, I would take them and blow them up massively. So like 600, 800 DPI, something ridiculous. And then once you've got that, you can try and mess about with it and then make it smaller again, back down to 600 or 300 DPI. And then you're almost bringing it back to a fairly usable standard. Still not great. You certainly wouldn't want to try and print it. You could get away with it to a point. We could also get away with printing it. If you printed it on a much smaller format, that would work as well, because then you're trying to kind of compress the quality of it and get it back that way. But it's been a fun exercise in trying to resurrect the artwork a little bit from something that really shouldn't be resurrectable, really. So, and of course, Andy's stuff with the lettering, that's worked brilliantly as well, because the lettering you already know is at a high quality. So even if the image itself isn't particularly fantastic, we know that it's at least readable.
Yeah, so the trick with lettering, just to explain, is all of this is what's called bitmap formings, which is when you're doing it, everything's like a little pixel or an increment of it. Lettering effectively sits above it and it hovers, and it can be any shape or size. The minute you've done it, so you can work in a tiny scale and then resize it, and it's as pin sharp as it was. So it means that you can, once you've got your lettering locked in, unless you've done something incredibly stupid, which you can do, by the way, and have done in the past, it's pin sharp. You'll be able to read it no matter what.
I thought before as well you were going to say it should never be resurrected, as in the book itself. I was feeling a bit...
I don't mind Dreamwave. Yeah.
Oh, you don't mind it. Okay.
It got me into colouring. I didn't colour for them, but it made me want to colour.
Yeah. So this is the page, this is the cover that you saw earlier on, okay? Do you want to see what it looks like now, that it's all jazzed and ready? Yeah, pretty much exactly the same.
Yeah. Because you're just looking at it on a screen, so...
Yeah.
And you've got lights on that as well, so it's, yeah.
Yeah, the truth is so there's this weird thing, and a little bit of an anecdote, side note here, okay, is that when you look at an image on your computer, whatever software you're using to display that image is doing an awful lot of heavy lifting in regards to trying to make that as presentable as possible, okay? So this image on the left-hand side, if you were to open it in, say, for example, Windows Photo or something like that, it will look really good as a standard single image. But if you try to mess around with it, if you try to do anything with it, again, if you try to print it, for example, that is when it becomes intolerable. And sometimes what will happen is you'll actually see the the program, make the adjustment, the image will pop up, the image will look, ooh, a bit awkward, and then it'll sort of pop. And again, it's the software doing a lot of the heavy lifting in the background, but to actually try and get it to a point, and again, this is just an example, try to get it to a point where the page is manageable, that's where we have to go through this process. And sometimes it can be a long, laborious process for you guys.
Yeah. That was the clever thing. So we had the macros as your friend.
Well, the longest bit for me was not doing once I got the pages that didn't have any lettering, that was fine, because I was just like, right, fine. It was actually re-lettering the work that was already done and having it match, because otherwise, the page one you will see, I did change certain bits, so I actually repainted. You can't really tell, but I know the bits to make it match. And that's the thing, is having to get it so it's just there, so when I erase the bits, pop the letter on, it looks identical. So if you look at the previews, if you're not, that we're already out there for the 5 pages, if you didn't know, you would swear they were the originals, but no, they were all redone. And once I did it, although we had Simon's lettering guides, I actually didn't pay any attention to them, because I didn't realize it was at the bottom of the folder of images that Dave sent me. So once it was all done, it's like, oh yeah, just rechecking this. Oh, so I had a little look at what Simon did, lettering guides, and it was like, not too bad actually. We're on the same wavelength. That's all right. You win.
Yeah, with the number of pages we did as well. When I was using Photoshop and Affinity, it's got a really good way where it actually can record what you're doing as you're doing it. So I'm naturally a very lazy person at heart. So what I decided to do was I recorded myself doing the first initial kind of like adjustments and making sure that worked. And then I just blanket applied that to every single page of an issue and just did it. And it would take like initially about maybe like a minute or 2 maximum to kind of do that, which is really handy for me. And all I need to do then was just go back and look through it and see, right, which pages did that not work particularly well on, and then go back into those ones specifically and redo those. But that was my shotgun approach of just taking what I'd done to one page, applying it across a ton of them in one go, and rather than trying to do it bit by bit by bit like a proper archivist type person would do. Because I'm, again, naturally a lazy person, so yeah.
So you might be looking at this thinking, okay, I get it, like, you know, you're talking about doing all this work and things like that. But actually, what does that translate to? What does that actually mean? So this is 3 of the pages that we didn't have. And these are, again, the ones that came from Simon. Again, you can see, you know, these are where all the speech bubbles would have been, where all of the panel descriptors would have been, things like that. And this is how these images would have looked if you had them on your screen, all right? Now, bear in mind, I don't think anybody at home is working with a PC monitor this big. If you are, well done you. You've obviously done very well for yourself. But ultimately, you know, these are being blown up on a much bigger screen, okay? This is how they ended up after we managed to do everything, which I'm sure you can see is a lot better. So chaps, again, is there anything, you know, between the 2 images that you think is worth pointing out?
See, I'm old, I can't see.
Yeah.
I'll go down here and try not to fall. There's a couple of pages, I don't know if they're here, but I actually flipped them round because the way the dialogue was, it didn't flow naturally. So to explain, the art of lettering is, there's a lot of things, but part of it is, it should complement the art. It shouldn't overpower it, but it should help direct the flow of the story. Your eye should be helped to be guided by the lettering. So you're trying to make sure that if one character speaks, they should be, ideally for Western comics, on the left. And then you go left to right because that's how we read, so it's how we're trained to follow. So there are a couple of pages throughout that I've actually flipped individual panels around just so I can actually get the flow of the dialogue, so I'm dragging you down the page. I think the one on the end with the little box, that kind of shows you the lettering at each panel is taking you along and down, so your eye is following the natural flow of the page. So that was kind of the biggest challenge for me, because I think it's one of Joe Nang's earliest comic jobs as well, which is one of these things that comic artists, as they develop, get a better understanding, because it's one of the things, particularly for, having done fan comics for years as well, the first thing you do is, I'm going to draw the thing that looks cool. where does the lettering go? And you've not left space for the letterer. And we've all seen stuff like that where you've got speech bubbles obscuring characters' faces or bits of the action. So most of my work is trying to guide that so you can read the story easily, particularly in this when we're dealing with work that Kris has adjusted a lot of levels and a lot of punch-up, but still, because it's all line art and this is from an era where there's not a lot of inking done on the page to add depth, which is what happened when comics went back when I was a lad, when this was all just fields. Most of that falls to the colorist these days. And because that's not there's a lot of depth of field not there. So I'm trying to make sure I'm making it as easy as possible for you to read the story and for it to make sense.
Yeah, because that was something that Dreamwave were massive on doing that. It was a big part of their house style where all the characters would be inked, but all the backgrounds would be just done in pencil. Which, on the one hand, you think, well, that works. It makes the characters pop from the background. But from a colorist perspective, it makes it very difficult. Because when you've got that page scanned in, scanning inks is great. And you can scan pencils, great. If you're trying to scan inks and pencils at the same time, they use different settings, and you're trying to get both. And that's where you get these kind of issues where you either get pencils that look too faint, or you get pencils that look too dark with inks that look too faint, and vice versa. And it just kind of makes it tricky to kind of balance it. And a lot of the Dreamwave stuff, you're dealing with very, very faint pencils at a very low resolution on something that's been printed and then re-scanned back in and then adjusted again. So you've got all these factors that go against it. So the fact that we managed to get something that is still readable is pretty cool. Although I don't like your George Lucasing it of just changing the artwork. So, you know. Tut.
Yeah, and this is the thing, you know, it's never going to be the exact way that you would have picked it up. One, it's not colored. But that brings us to an interesting conversation about, well, why didn't we color it?
Time. All of the time.
Yeah. I mean, that is one thing. I mean, as you will have heard from JP, you know, coloring a comic book is not easy. It's not straightforward, especially when you're working off 20-year-old emails of photocopies of scans and things like that. However, don't worry, I'm not about to say we have colored the whole thing.
We haven't.
Yeah. But one of the things that came out of Simon... I was about to say that came out of Simon Furman's envelope, and I did. Anyway, that came out of the envelope that Simon Furman sent me was this. Now, bear in mind, if you were at Manchester, we've released this full thing, so you can go online. There'll be a QR code later on if you haven't read it and you desperately want to read it. We'll send you a link so you can see it. But one of the things that came out of it was something that made my heart skip a little bit, was we actually had some of the next issue as well. This is page 1 of issue 5. Spoiler alert, something bad happens to Shockwave at the end of issue 4. All right? Yeah. Spoiler alert for a 20-year-old comic that never came out. But we got this, which is a fully inked page, photocopied, scanned, and things like that. And because nobody had ever seen this before, this had never made its way online. Nobody had ever managed. As far as I'm aware, Simon was probably the only person that still had this. I thought it would be really cool to just be able to do this. So I reached out to Joe, who was the artist on this, and I reached out to Simon, and I said, look, we've got these images, can we put them out? Again, bearing in mind that none of these people were paid for this work, are we able to do it? And they all kindly said yes. And that's when I struck upon the idea of, well, maybe what if we can try and color just one page? So I know he's sitting over there, so I'd like you to give JP a round of applause because he did this, and I'd like to welcome him up on stage. Because this is you see, it's all a nice synergy. You listen to the panel beforehand, and now I'm going to hand the mic over to you so you can tell them how you turned that into that.
My mother-in-law. No. Yeah, so I can add myself to the list of creators that was also not paid for this. Pat Lee, wherever you are. I love Dreamwave. I love the way Dreamwave looks. As Kris said, the way it's coloured, I love their colouring style. So I was, when I was like, could you recreate this? I'm like, happily. What I will say is, as they've said, when I showed you earlier, for those of you here earlier, and if you weren't, you really only have yourselves to blame for the confusion you're about to have. What you want is for the line work to be as solidly black and white as possible. So just white, just black, because it makes it easy to colour and all that. This was not the purest of anything. So as Kris said, it required a lot of fiddling to try and get it even passable. And it looks quite nice on here. It doesn't really when you look at it close up, because this is kind of much more scratchy. But it was just nice because really it was what Dreamwave did was they didn't use, like, the backgrounds were like animation. They were painted, and there was very rarely black lines, and it meant that the foreground stuff really like pops out. So I got to do my best Dreamwave impression basically, and do lots of lovely soft brush strokes and painterly stuff. And then in the foreground, it's all kind of this kind of liquidy, kind of cell shady goodness. So yeah, that was it really, Dave. Thanks for asking. It was lovely.
No, you're more than welcome. In terms of the colouring itself. No, that's okay. So just in terms of the colouring itself, bearing in mind that you were happy to do that for free, would you mind doing all the rest of it for me?
Do you know what? I have all the time in the world.
Fantastic.
I mean, you haven't slept in 6 months. How do you feel not sleeping for a couple of years?
I'm fine about it. I was saying the other day, I think I remember sleep from a dream I had 2 years ago. It's a dream, yeah.
Oh.
That's what I call it when I wake up and I peed myself. Not another Dreamwave.
Just give him a round of applause. My mother-in-law. So yeah, and so that was it. We were able to do it. I was able to pop along to Reading and
lay to rest the ghost of 20 years of regret and torment and upset.
Yeah, exactly. You know, it was funny. This originally all started as me wanting to just do a panel at Reading talking about 20 years of the end of Dreamwave. And then it spread to Manchester. And now it's here.
It's now infected the proper show. Tainted, if you will.
Yeah. And there might be something coming up this year in Reading as well. So, do we have any wrestling fans in the room? Yeah, you are in the midst of the Dreamwave retirement tour. Like, if you get that reference, somebody got the reference, yeah. You know, this whole thing is gone on for basically a year, but it will come to an end in Reading this year. That is not me trying to sell tickets, but tickets are available right now. But yeah, and this was it. This was us trying to put out a little bit of lost media. Incidentally, if you want to download the comic, you can go scan that QR code now. It is available online as well. Some new sites ran with the story that we put it out there. TFW 2005 didn't.
Should probably clarify you're not allowed to sell it either.
Yes, that's an important thing. You cannot sell this. This is why it's out for free. Because you don't own it, we don't own it. We were only able to put it out by the grace of the people that did make it. And
didn't get paid for it.
Yeah, and who technically still own it. So yeah, good luck trying to track down the other 3 issues, though, if you want to find out what happened before issue 4.
Well, to be fair, you can get them if you know where to look. eBay is your friend. However, actually go to ebid.net. They have quite reasonable Dreamwave prices there. I may have been hunting and putting together the rest of my collection that I got rid of. Tainted by Dave, just, you know.
Appreciate that this is pretty much just us telling you about it, but does anybody have any questions or anything like that in regards to, there's one right at the back. Go, Siloé, run!
Like the wind.
I love the idea that his question is just going to be, why did you bother?
Not quite. What I was going to ask, though, is you mentioned Simon Furman just happened to have all this lost media. Do you think if we found him and just, like, shook him, more would fall out? If he apparently just has it in his...
Sorry, I didn't catch the end of that.
Oh, so if we just, like, find Simon Furman, do you think he just has more lost media hiding in his closet?
We believe so.
Yeah,
and
probably.
He won't let us near his house, no matter how nicely we ask or camp outside it.
You know, it's a really interesting one. If you get the chance over the course of this weekend to chat with Jim Sorensen, or alternatively, if you come along to ClubCon tomorrow, or alternatively come along to Kris and Jim's panel on Sunday, you will hear a bit more about lost media. But, just a bit, absolutely. But what's so fascinating is that this stuff still exists. Now, we're only talking about something that took place 20 years ago. Kris and Jim are going to be talking about something that took place nearly a half century ago. 40 years ago, which is nearly half a century. I was very good at choosing my words there. But the fact is, a lot of people sit on this stuff and they don't know what they've got. Jim, for example, will tell stories of people getting in contact with them because they found it in a dumpster. A relative of somebody who worked at Hasbro or Dreamwave or something like that will find this stuff inevitably if it still exists, and it will come to light. It just has to find the right people, because the reality is, and I'm not throwing shade here or anything like that, but the reality is there are some collectors out there who like the idea that they own something that nobody else knows about. So there is stuff that is in the hands of private collectors and they don't want to share it, and that's their choice. But one of the things that we love is the preservation and the fact that... Mr. Turnbull?
I'm fine, it's good.
Okay.
From the medication.
But we just love the idea that we get to share it with people, which is why we're desperate. But yeah, there is always going to be more lost media out there.
Yeah, and I'm sure Kris and Jim will talk about it in both panels. We fetishize this because it was important to us. For most of these people, it was just a job that paid the bills. It'd be like someone coming up to you in your day job and saying, "Tell me how you filed that. That was amazing."
Well, that's happened. This happened to me. I'm not a big Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles fan. I like the show; it's decent, but I'm not a big fan of it. But years and years back, I did a Turtles colouring job for Titan, and is it too feedbacky? Yeah. So I did a colouring job for Turtles, and again, I don't know anything about it. And then somebody emailed me a couple of months back asking if I had the original files for this comic, because this particular, it was a Turtles Fast Forward, it was called, and I can't remember much about it. But this is a comic that I'd coloured, and this comic apparently can't be found anywhere. So this guy came to me and said, I'm trying to get copies of this, can't find it, do you have anything about it? And I had my comp copies from back in the day. So I sent those to this guy, but he didn't have the second part, which I had also worked on, but I didn't have a physical copy of. But I did have my original low-res copies that I'd sent to the editor to look at. So this guy was kind of doing what you're doing for Dreamwave, but for Turtle stuff. And you don't know what people have got until you start working around and trying to find them, really.
And that's the reality. It is, does somebody know what they've got? But yeah, hopefully there's more. We really do hope there's more. We hope that you come along to Mining Energon on Sunday for more. Was that
Blatant
subtle
plug.
enough? Any other questions? Nobody else wants to talk to me about Dreamwave? No? Yeah, story of my life.
No, we do.
Oh, there we go. Sympathy question coming up.
Again, probably just going to ask, why did you bother?
Hi there. Did you ever think about using any of the AI tools to upscale any of the stuff?
It's not worth it, Andy. It's not worth it.
Steady on, Turnbull.
There's to step aside from the ethical and moral consideration, a lot of AI and a lot of remastering jobs that get done and things do more damage than good. I will cite, if you're a Transformers fan, when IDW did the classics and Digicore remastered the Marvel original stuff, they made a mess of things and butchered a lot of the actual quality of the line work if you actually are familiar with it.
But it added typos to the lettering.
And new colouring errors when they're fixing old ones. So the point is, what we've done is just preserve something in a functional form. This is not real preservation. The ideal way would be to have something. I mean, to be honest, the way you would do it is just get an artist to redraw it from that and at a high res, because you could print it out and it'd be a bit blocky, but a decent artist would do it. But it's a lot of time and effort, and again, it adds to the long list of people that don't get paid for doing stuff involving Dreamwave. So, and there's enough of them already. We shouldn't be creating more.
We've added 3 now, haven't we?
Yeah, exactly.
4 if you class JP.
Yeah,
so, yeah.
No, I don't.
Yeah, so basically what you're saying is we didn't use AI because we wanted to be old school and retro about it.
But it's more just you're duplicating work anyway, because the biggest problem with most AI tools is once you've done it, you've got to have a human eye go in and fix the things that AI's changed anyway, because it's not smart enough to recognize things. So no, there's limits to it, and the whole point was it was just trying to get something out there so people can read it and enjoy it. And the thing is, if we were to have done something to that scale, you then have the problem is everyone and the dog is going to try and print it and do. There are people who will then try, and you've seen it with fanworks that they'll try and sell on and do stuff. That's not the point. We're putting it back out there so people can get a look at something that they were on the cusp of getting. And we're not trying to make money off the back of it. We're just like, we've got this. This is cool. Let's share it with you. It's the same for like all the rail stuff that we did for the movie thing. It's just like there's no attempt to kind of go, this is it. We're riding the rails gravy train now. But it's just, this is cool. Let's get it out there so as many people can experience it as best as they can. Because we're fans too. So.
Yeah. So, just a little bit before we wrap up, just for context moving forward, we showed off page 1 of issue 5 there. That issue was never finished. The script does exist, but the art was never completed. So if you're wondering if issue 5 will ever be produced, the answer is no, it won't. Not only that as well, but because it's in such an unfinished state, and when I say unfinished, I mean there are pages that just have panels missing out of them because Joe, who was the artist on the book, just didn't get round to drawing that panel. He might have drawn a panel here and then a panel over on this page and things like that. So in terms of those pages, they won't ever, be released publicly.
I just had a mad thought though.
Yeah.
There's several people in this room. What if we gave them like a panel each to draw? And we could just redo the whole thing that way.
Some kind of Dreamwave sweatshop.
Yeah. And what we need to do is not pay them.
Yeah. Do we have any budding artists here who want exposure?
Mugs.
Yeah, people die of exposure. Yeah.
So there was that. But there's another issue when it comes to Age of Wrath, which was that Simon Furman never actually wrote the script for issue 6. So
if we give everybody a line,
so far. So if we've got any budding writers in the room. However, if you do want to know how this ends, because you've read issue 4 of Age of Wrath without any context of what's come before it, but you really desperately want to know how it ends, and you want to know if Shockwave was going to be all right, you can come along to Simon's stall where he has the script packs. So it's a really good opportunity for you to be able to have a read of it and compare it to the line work to just see, what Simon writes and how it's interpreted by an artist. That's always a really interesting thing. But also, he has the layout or the outline for what issue 6 would have been. So we have filled in the middle, but the ending is forever. The ending is forever out there as a long-lost piece of media. But, as I say, come along on Sunday for Mining Energon, because we have Alex Milne with us, and Marcelo is here as well over the course of the weekend. Incidentally, Marcelo actually did some fill-in pages for War Within issue 4, and he is bringing the actual pages to this convention. So if you want to see what the pages looked like that he filled in for, you can pop along to his table and have a look at them as well.
If Dave hasn't already bought them.
No.
Grace isn't here, it's fine, you can admit to us. You're going to buy one, aren't you?
I don't know. I don't know. But yeah, so Marcelo and Alex both worked on the Dreamwave Energon comic. If we have any fans of those artists in the room. Energon, believe it or not, that much loved series, that middle one, you know, Armada was something, Cybertron was something, everybody knows Energon was where it really was at. That was actually Alex Milne's first published comic book work that he was credited for. And I believe it was the same for Marcelo as well. So they will be on with Simon. We'll be talking about that series, where it ended up, how it got to the place that it did, and also what could have been if Dreamwave hadn't imploded. So hopefully you'll come along to that on Sunday to learn just a little bit more, and it will be one of the final nails in my Dreamwave coffin. We have got probably time for one last question if anybody's got one, otherwise we will jump out. Oh, we've got two at the back. People have been saving up for this.
So, when are you going to get Pat Lee into the convention, then?
I'll field this, because believe it or not, we've had the conversation. It's seriously been talked about, and this is the kind of thing I'd probably talk, so I'll do my Constructicon hat on for this. Now, the honest answer is, would he be an interesting guest to have? Yes. But the whole point would be is, we bring people along, and what we want to have is everyone to have a good time. Guests, fans, vendors, attendees. And with the best will in the world, we could come up and talk to Pat and talk about the genuinely good contributions that Dreamwave made to Transformers comics. But then we would have to turn around and talk about the unpleasantness and the ugliness of how it ended. And that, I don't think that's a panel anyone wants to see. We all joke it'd be nice to hear him held to account and all that, but I don't know about you, but I wouldn't want to spectate on people picking at his bones about. And if anyone's listened to Simon and Andrew's podcast, Simon's quite philosophical about it now and talks about the fact that there were young 20-something men who got rich very quick and made bad choices. So, and even now ascribes that not necessarily out of any deviousness or maliciousness, just poor management. But I think a panel with that, we wouldn't want to ask those questions, but by the same token, if we didn't ask them, we're not really being honest and upfront. So it's not really an experience I think would be good for anybody.
And I think the legacy of Dreamwave is not that these books went unpublished and that everything went up in a dumpster fire. I think the legacy of it is Alex Milne, Josh Perez, Marcelo Mathieu. These are the legacy that Dreamwave produced, and we will always have, you know, those guests here for us. This week, in fact. I think there was one last one at the back there.
You sort of already answered this question, but how much do we know about, like, for any forward plans that Dreamwave had, if past Age of Wrath and past Energon? Do we have any information on those plans?
Well, Energon, Sunday, hint, hint. As for Age of Wrath, Simon didn't really have anything past that point. I think he clearly wanted to do more, but there are some interviews which he was going to be jumping on to do the ongoing after James McDonough and Adam Patek had left. Kris Saraceni, who the original writer of the first miniseries, Prime Director, was going to jump on for an issue, and then Furman was going to be taking the reins, which he's talked about before. So I don't know whether Age of Wrath would have continued on, or if he's on the main book. So he's not really had anything concrete from that point. And as a gigging writer, he'd be pitching for the project once the other one's in, and they've got an idea of all the numbers as well. Because if it's not going to shift units, it's not really worth their while doing it. So,
yeah, ironically, the ongoing is the one that we know the least about in terms of the books themselves, because the writers, James McDonough and Adam Paddock, when things went south, they left the book very, very, well, maybe a month before Dreamwave shuttered, and they have been, and fair play to them, they have been incredibly tight-lipped. We don't know scripts, we don't know plots, everything in terms of the ongoing was just left as a giant cliffhanger, and, you know, some 20 years later, they've not broken that promise. So I think, unfortunately, that is forever outside the realms of possibility. Energon, on the other hand, come along on Sunday. And I think that's going to do it. Unless anybody's desperately burning, we will get away, because Mr. Turnbull's making some really funny noises. And I think
not the usual ones either.
Yeah, I think he needs to go on charge. So thank you all very much. We will be back very shortly.